What if the scariest form of discipline isn't loud or extreme, but something so quiet you almost miss it? What if it doesn't look like intensity or heroic effort, but like a person moving through their day with a calm, unsettling steadiness? There's something eerie about that kind of consistency, something that doesn't need to announce itself or prove anything. It just exists, like a pulse beneath the noise of the world, easy to overlook, but impossible to shake once you notice it. You've seen people like this before, though maybe you didn't realize it at the time. They never rush, never make bold declarations, never talk about what they're going to do someday. They simply do what needs to be done, not because they feel inspired, not because they woke up with fire in their chest, but because somewhere deep inside, something has settled. Something has made peace with repetition, and that makes their discipline almost frightening. We're used to discipline that looks dramatic. The early morning workouts, the color-coded routines, the loud announcements of new beginnings. But the truth is, that form of discipline burns out quickly. It needs applause to survive. It needs witnesses. It needs momentum. Quiet discipline, however, doesn't ask for any of that. It moves without permission. It grows without being seen. It's the kind of discipline that whispers instead of shouts, and somehow the whisper carries further. What we rarely admit is that this level of commitment doesn't feel exciting from the inside. It feels ordinary. It feels like choosing the same small action over and over, long after the mood has faded. It feels like doing the thing even on dull days, heavy days, lonely days. And there's something almost haunting about a person who can keep going like that, not because they're superhuman, but because they've stopped bargaining with themselves. As time passes, this quiet rhythm begins to change them, not all at once, not in ways you can measure week by week, but slowly, like stone shaped by water. Their life starts shifting in subtle ways. A clearer mind, a calmer heart, a deeper sense of direction. It's not flashy. It's not inspirational. It's deeper than that. It's identity forming itself, choice by choice, until the person you see is no longer the person they once were. And that's the real power here. Not the action itself, but the identity it creates. When discipline becomes part of who you are, you no longer fight yourself every day. You no longer search for motivation the way others search for lost keys. You move with a quiet certainty, the kind that doesn't need to be seen to be real, the kind that feels like inner gravity. This is why the quiet version of discipline is the scariest. It doesn't explode, it erodes, it reshapes, it rewrites. And by the time the world notices, the transformation has already taken place. But before we can understand how someone reaches that level, we need to explore where it truly begins, not in what they do, but in who they slowly decide to become. Real discipline doesn't begin in the dramatic moments. It begins in the quiet ones, the ones no one sees. When you stop negotiating with yourself, it begins in that soft space between intention and action, where most of us start to bargain. We tell ourselves we'll begin tomorrow. We promise we'll try when we have more energy, more clarity, more time. And slowly, without even noticing, we let our own excuses shape who we become. But then there are the rare moments when something inside finally settles. When you wake before dawn, and instead of arguing with the weight of sleep, you simply rise. Not because you feel powerful, not because you're filled with purpose, but because you made a quiet decision that this part of your life is no longer up for debate. That small choice, simple, almost boring, becomes the start of something deeper. Most people think discipline is about willpower, but in truth, it's more about peace. It's the peace that comes when you stop fighting with your own mind every morning, when you stop giving your mood the final say, when you stop letting comfort negotiate you out of growth. The disciplined person isn't harder than everyone else. They're quieter. They've removed the noise of constant inner bargaining, and what's left is a kind of stillness that feels almost sacred. We rarely admit how much energy we lose in negotiation. The long back and forth with ourselves, the arguments in our head, the tiny delays that add up. We don't notice how heavy these moments become until we meet someone who doesn't carry them, someone who moves through their routine like they're honoring something, like each action is a promise they made to themselves long before the moment arrived. Imagine that early morning again, the room dark, the air cold, the world silent. Your body wants to stay in bed. Your mind starts whispering justifications, but you don't listen this time. You stand, you move. And in that small decision, your inner world shifts just a little, not in a dramatic, life-changing way, but in a subtle, grounded way that you feel in your chest. It's the feeling of finally being on your own side. As time passes, these moments build on one another. A choice becomes a pattern becomes a rhythm becomes part of who you are. And eventually, you look back and realize you're no longer the person who argued with yourself over every step. You've become someone steadier, someone quieter, someone harder to shake. This is the part of discipline that feels almost frightening, not because it's harsh, but because it comes from such a calm place. A place where you no longer need to force yourself into action. You simply act because you've chosen a version of yourself that doesn't negotiate away your future. And once that negotiation ends, something deeper begins. A transformation that doesn't come from pressure or perfection, but from finally choosing who you're going to be every single day. Effort can push you for a while, but it can't carry you forever. We all learn this at some point, usually on the kind of day when our energy fades, our mood dips, and everything we promised ourselves feels heavier than we expected. But then, there's a quieter truth waiting underneath all of that. Effort fades, identity stays, and the moment discipline starts to feel natural is the moment it becomes part of who you believe you are. You can feel this shift in small, almost invisible ways. Imagine someone practicing alone in a quiet room long after everyone else has stopped. There's no praise, no applause, no spark of motivation pushing them forward. Only the soft sound of their own breath, the steady repetition of their hands, the familiar rhythm of a routine they've done 100 times before. On the outside, it looks simple. On the inside, something much deeper is happening. They're not doing the work because they have to. They're doing it because it feels like them. In truth, this is where real discipline begins to thicken. At first, you push yourself because you want results. You want progress. You want change. But as time passes, you start to notice something different growing underneath your effort. A sense of alignment. A sense that these actions don't just move you forward. They reflect you. They reveal you. They remind you of the person you're trying to become. What we rarely admit is that identity is the strongest force we carry. When you see yourself as someone who follows through, you follow through. When you see yourself as someone who keeps going, you keep going. And when the practice becomes part of your story, you no longer need permission from your feelings to continue. The work doesn't get easier, but it becomes less of a question, less of a fight, less of a negotiation with your own resistance. There's a quiet liberation in that, a calm you don't expect. You move from, I must do this, to this is who I am, and something inside settles. The pressure softens, the hesitation loses its grip. Discipline stops being a struggle against yourself and becomes a conversation with your purpose. A conversation that feels honest, steady, and strangely gentle. Most people chase motivation because effort alone feels fragile. But when identity steps in, the equation changes. You no longer depend on mood or excitement to stay consistent. You act because not acting would betray something important, something rooted inside you. And that's when discipline starts to feel less like a burden and more like a form of inner freedom. The kind that doesn't shout, but hums quietly beneath your day. This is the turning point that many never reach. Not because it's hidden, but because it's simple. When discipline becomes who you are, you stop carrying it like a weight. You wear it like truth. And from that moment on, the path ahead feels different. Not easier, but clearer. As if each step is guided by a peace that was waiting for you all along. There comes a moment on any disciplined path when the world around you grows quiet. Not because anything dramatic happens, but because serious growth creates distance. You step away from the noise, from the easy distractions, from the people who still live by impulse. And suddenly, you're left with yourself. At first, that silence feels sharp. It feels like something is missing. It feels like you've traded comfort for a kind of emptiness you didn't expect. But then something subtle begins to shift. You start noticing that this emptiness isn't actually empty. It's space. Space where your thoughts can land. Space where your intentions can breathe. Space where the parts of you that were drowned out by noise finally rise to the surface. And in truth, this loneliness that once felt heavy starts to feel strangely clean. Most people imagine mastery as a loud journey, full of intensity, constant motivation, endless momentum. What we rarely admit is that mastery is mostly quiet. It's long hours in rooms where no one claps for you. It's choosing to stay in when everyone else goes out. It's sitting with the uncomfortable awareness of who you are and who you're trying to become. And sometimes it's realizing that the people around you don't understand why you're choosing this path at all. As time passes, this distance can make you wonder whether you're losing something important. Old habits fall away, old patterns break, old versions of you start to dissolve, and the people who once felt familiar begin to feel further and further away. It's natural to feel the ache of that. It's natural to question whether the quiet is worth it. But if you stay with it just a little longer, you begin to sense a different kind of calm rising beneath the surface. This calm isn't loud or triumphant. It doesn't rush through you like excitement. It settles slowly, like dust in a beam of morning light. You realize that silence isn't your enemy, it's your teacher. It shows you what matters. It reveals what's real. It strips away all the noise you used to use to avoid yourself. And slowly, the loneliness becomes less like isolation and more like clarity. There's a quiet strength in reaching this point. The point where you're no longer scared of being alone with your discipline. You're no longer waiting for someone to validate your choices or understand your path. You simply walk it, step by step, knowing that what you're building inside yourself matters more than anyone else's approval. And then comes the deeper realization, the one that doesn't arrive all at once, but forms slowly, like a soft truth taking shape. Once you learn to sit with this loneliness without running from it, something powerful awakens. Discipline stops depending on your emotions. It stops wavering with your moods. It becomes steady, rooted, almost unshakable. The kind of discipline that grows in the quiet and stays with you long after everything else fades. There comes a point in discipline where emotion stops being the engine, not because feelings disappear, but because you stop depending on them to move. You begin to act from a place deeper than motivation, deeper than inspiration, deeper even than the rise and fall of your own moods. It's the place where decisions live, the quiet decisions you made long before the moment arrived. At first, this shift feels strange. You're so used to chasing the right feeling, waiting for the right spark, searching for that brief wave of energy that makes everything easier. But then, as time passes, you start to notice how unreliable those waves really are. Some days they carry you. Most days they leave you stranded. And in truth, this emotional roller coaster drains more energy than the work itself. What we rarely admit is that we spend so much of our lives negotiating with how we feel. We wait to begin until we feel ready. We stop the moment we feel tired. We drift toward comforts when we feel bored. And without realizing it, our entire path becomes controlled by emotions that change with the weather. But the people who reach a deeper level of discipline move differently. They're anchored somewhere inside themselves. Their choices don't rise and fall with each mood. There's something almost silent about them, not in a cold or distant way, but in a steady, grounded way, as if they walk with an inner stillness that nothing outside can shake. You see it in the way they work, in the way they show up, in the way they keep moving even on the days when every emotion pulls them in the opposite direction. They don't resist their feelings, but they don't obey them either. They acknowledge the waves, but they follow the compass. And slowly, something begins to shift within you as well. You start to imagine what your life would feel like if your actions weren't tied to whatever mood you woke up in. You start to sense how much clarity you would gain if your choices were rooted in something steadier than emotion. You begin to realize how peaceful life becomes when you stop waiting for the perfect feeling to start. This kind of discipline feels almost like an inner silence, a calm that settles beneath your thoughts, beneath your impulses, beneath your temporary frustrations. It doesn't shout, it doesn't rush, it simply holds you steady. And from that stillness, you move through the world with a different kind of strength, one that doesn't need noise to prove itself. The truth is, once discipline evolves into something independent of feeling, becomes a constant, a quiet constant that carries you regardless of weather, mood, or uncertainty. And with that constancy comes a transformation you never expect when you first start the journey. Not the obvious success you can show off, not the external gains everyone talks about, but something gentler, something deeper, an inner peace that grows slowly, like a light warming a room from the inside out. There comes a point on the path of discipline when everything becomes quieter, not because life slows down, but because you stop fighting yourself. The pressure dissolves, the struggle softens, and instead of pushing your way through every moment, you begin to move with a kind of inner harmony that feels almost unfamiliar at first. You realize that the scariest level of discipline is not the hardest one. it's the calmest one. At this stage, you no longer rush to prove anything. You no longer chase applause or validation. You no longer depend on mood or momentum. You simply do what you said you would do, not out of force, but out of alignment. It feels as if your mind and your actions finally agree with each other, after years of pulling in different directions. And in truth, that agreement feels like a form of quiet freedom. What we rarely admit is that most of our stress comes from living out of sync with ourselves. We want one thing, but we act in another direction. We promise ourselves change, but we repeat the same old patterns. We dream of a different life, yet we cling to the comfort of old habits. This tension builds silently, creating a kind of internal noise that wears us down more than any challenge outside of us ever could. But then there comes a day, sometimes small, sometimes unremarkable, when something inside finally aligns. You stop negotiating, you stop resisting, you stop searching for shortcuts, and discipline becomes less like a battle and more like breathing, steady, natural, almost effortless in its rhythm. Not because the tasks are easier, but because the mind performing them is no longer divided. As time passes, you begin to feel a sense of belonging within your own life, a sense that you're finally inhabiting the person you were trying to grow into. The loneliness that once accompanied your discipline turns into peace. The silence you once feared becomes grounding. You find comfort in routine, not because it limits you, but because it frees you from chaos. You begin to trust yourself again, not through grand achievements, but through the quiet consistency of keeping your word. And slowly, discipline becomes something gentle, something warm, something that doesn't demand, but guides. You no longer look for perfection. You no longer punish yourself for mistakes. You simply return to your path, again and again, with a kind of soft determination that feels deeper than any burst of motivation could ever reach. This is the final realization that true discipline is not pressure, it's peace. It's the understanding that the more aligned you are with your choices, the less force you need to make them. It's the moment you see that discipline isn't a cage, but a doorway, a quiet opening into a version of yourself who feels whole, steady, and unshaken by noise. And from this place, the journey doesn't end. It simply continues, carried not by struggle, but by a calm certainty that whatever comes next, you'll meet it with the same quiet strength growing inside you now.